It was developed in the 1950s, and it was never viewed as a classical type building, if you remembered. That would have blended in with all the fine period residences in Templemore. It was, however, an iconic building that holds great memories for many of the townspeople and many of you here tonight, and the adjoining parishes. It sits, or used to sit, where Cambie's Garage now have developed the car park opposite their main building. It was a very large building and certainly commanded a unique location to advertise all the forthcoming screenings and lavish posters. It holds personal memories for me, of course, because it was developed by my late grandfather Joseph Kelly and his brother-in-law Tom Kevin, the same Tom Kevin who didn't turn up with the uniforms, and a brother of Jim Kevin who played rugby for Templemore. They formed a company known as the Roscrea and Athy Picture Company Limited and operated a large number of cinemas from Roscrea to Athy to Portarlington. As a young boy, I do remember my grandfather would collect me at lunchtime on a Sunday and bring me on a whirlwind tour of the cinematic collection. I would watch the first half of McKenna's Gold in Roscrea, then I'd move to Portarlington for the second half, and then see the first half again in Burr, and then it was too late to see the second half again, and I never really got around to the end of the film. And you know, I never knew if Michael Caine and his battalion had escaped the clutches of the Japs. But we would get in during the week because we had a little bit of pull, and we'd go to Templemore and we'd see the finale again. So you get 3 showings in the 1 week. It was fantastic. So when you dipped in out of the bright day on a Sunday afternoon for the matinee in the town and in the cinema, you usually joined a long queue who were immersed in discussion on the great evening of entertainment that lay ahead. And where Martin Deduan would dispense the little coloured tickets from behind a glass booth, if I remember correctly, and for a little bit extra, you could get seated in the balcony. Now this was a balcony like no other, with plush red and orange velvet seats, where one had to climb a few short steps, but in reality you were on the same level as the pit with just a small wall between the two areas. Of course, that was also a haven for courting couples who would like to make their way to the back row. That pit was infamous, more so for the characters that took up position there. It was constantly controlled by the ably armed Jerry Crowley, if you remember him, who with a flashlight in hand would instantaneously react to any vocal interruption to proceedings. This was particularly so when there was a breakdown in the projection room. Not all that uncommon, I can tell you that much. And this lun invariably would lead to derisory and defamatory comments about the projectionist, and the flicking of sweet papers were rolled to form a projectile at those at either end of the cinema, and of course those old film reels and projectors often lost focus, which also meant there was a hail of comments like "fix the bleep focus." And only real point of light in the crisis was from the projection room, where frantic efforts were being made to restore the movie, and of course during that break, order was policed by the able Jerry. Of course, this lull was also an opportunity to open the packet of Milky Mints or Curly Whirly, washed down with a Coke to be suitably armed with all those extra carbs for the balance of the film and the energy expended on such action. The screened films would vary. This was a picture of the old cinema as you would look up Richmond. And looking at the programme from 1953, before my time, the Westerns figured very heavily, with Wagon Master being screened on Monday the 3rd of August and described as "when justice fought for its life." That has a lot of resonance today, as you can imagine. And that uniquely, and for that price of one, the cinema goer was also treated to a second film on the same day, and one had to experience The Tattooed Stranger, and no description, but the title speaks for itself. Skipping to 1971, that's Monday the 2nd of August, the cinema screened Savage Pampas, described as "never have men fought so hard for their women." This was probably a truly life-changing event for all of those present. And by the early 70s, actors such as Chuck Connor, Sidney Poitier, Tony Curtis, Marlon Brando, to name but a few, appeared on the screen and became iconic figures. However, my lasting memory of the cinema will be those great westerns starring John Wayne in The Searchers, Rio Brava, Stagecoach, all classics and always designed to paint the Indian as a ruthless savage. My abiding memory was the scene in McKenna's Goal starring Gregory Peck, Omar Sharif and a young Telly Savalas as they escaped on horseback with the gold through the collapsing landscape. The poster for this film is enriched in colour, told its own story, and featured that dreaded Indian with the menacing tomahawk in his hand. One could live through the film because of the sheer size of the screen and the volume. Don't forget, at home in those days we only had black and white TVs, so it was very hard to work up any enthusiasm. I suppose the film brought one into another world through its magic and artistry and its sheer grandeur. It was a very unique experience, and invariably people cycle for miles from neighbouring parishes to witness these films. And these films would have been the talking point for years to come and lived with cinema-goers for their lives. Some cinema-goers, of course, took the whole experience a little too seriously, and in 1973 the Indians took back seat as Bruce Lee hit the big screen and launched Enter the Dragon. He entertained us with sheer violence and new weaponry, none more potent than his famous box kick. And after that screening, it was well told around the town that some of the highly charged audience ran from the cinema and practiced those same kicks with that famous purring whine on every bin along Main Street. The Gardaí launched an investigation, believe it or not, and I suppose for Templemore, the big screen had taken on a whole new reality. I'd say the following week, the Sound of Music was brought out to the archives and played. When the film ended, we would leave the cinema. We would adjust our eyes to the bright sunlight, run across the road to Andy Maloney's shop. We'd buy an ice pop and we would relive every moment of that film as we walked home, salivating and discussing every character encountered on that memorable evening. One thing we will never do is we will never get to experience anything quite unique as that again. Thanks very much.